$2.47. That's all Sofia Bennett had left in her palm when the fire took everything 3 weeks ago. She stood under a flickering streetlight in Philadelphia's warehouse district, counting the coins for the third time that morning, as if a different answer might appear if she concentrated hard enough. The metal was cold against her skin. November wind cut through the alley like a blade wrapped in ice, and frost coated the brick walls in delicate patterns that looked almost beautiful if you didn't know they meant another night sleeping in a car. Gas or coffee? She needed to choose. The car where she and her 7-year-old son Noah slept needed gas more than her body needed warmth. The fire had taken the apartment. It had taken the photographs, every image of Noah's father, the only proof he had ever existed. It had taken Noah's winter coat, the job references she needed to climb out of the shelter system, the security deposit she would never see again. All that remained was a backpack, a growing list of handwritten debts that now totaled $65,000, and the knowledge that she had 3 days to find a way to pay what couldn't possibly be paid. She slipped the coins into her coat pocket and turned toward the Harrington Hotel, 6 blocks away. The night shift started at 10. It was 9:15. She walked fast, her shoes worn through at the heel, breath misting in the frozen air. The kitchen at the Harrington was industrial and hot, a different world from the streets outside. Steam rose from boiling pots. Knives clattered against cutting boards. Sofia moved through the chaos with the invisible efficiency of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible, prepping vegetables, arranging plates, staying silent. Derek Collins, the night manager, stood near the walk-in freezer with his arms crossed. He was 43 years old, had thinning blonde hair slicked back with product, and wore the expression of a man who had discovered that cruelty was easier than kindness. He watched Sofia move past him and smiled. Not a kind smile. A smile that meant something. "Bennett," he said, his voice low so only she could hear. "You look tired." "I'm fine," Sofia said. She didn't stop moving. "You're not fine. You're falling apart." He stepped closer. "You're living in your car, aren't you? I heard the other girls talking. You and your little kid, sleeping in that piece of garbage vehicle in the parking lot." Sofia's hands kept moving, chopping onions, her vision blurring slightly. She did not respond. "Here's the thing," Derek continued. "If you want to keep this job, you're going to need to be more grateful. More cooperative. Margaret doesn't like servers who look desperate. It makes the customers uncomfortable. And if Margaret isn't happy, then I'm not happy. And if I'm not happy, I'm going to have to report your immigration status to the authorities. I'm sure they'd love to hear about an undocumented worker stealing from the register." "I've never stolen anything," Sofia whispered. "That's not what I'd tell them." He leaned against the counter. "You have a son, right? Noah? Beautiful kid. Would be a shame if he ended up in the system. Foster care is rough on kids that young." Sofia's hand stilled. The knife hung in the air. For just a moment, something cold and dangerous stirred in her chest, but it passed quickly, leaving only the familiar weight of powerlessness. "Just be good," Derek said, and he walked away. The dinner service that night lasted until 3 in the morning. 72 covers, which meant 72 plates plated perfectly, 72 opportunities to go unnoticed and unappreciated. Sofia worked alongside Marcus, a kind man in his 60s who had been in the kitchen for 30 years and who never complained about anything. He slipped her a container of leftover salmon during the rush. "For your boy," he said quietly. "He needs protein more than the dumpsters do." When the last plate left the kitchen, Sofia changed out of her chef's coat and walked back into the Philadelphia night. The city looked different at 3:45 in the morning. Emptier. Sharper. The streetlights cast long shadows across the wet pavement, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and then faded. She walked toward the parking lot where her car waited, a 2009 Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been on for 2 years and a passenger window that didn't roll down all the way. She had paid $800 for it 18 months ago, money that might as well have been $8,000 the way it had hurt to spend. As she cut through the warehouse district to save 5 minutes, voices stopped her. "Please." A man's voice, breathless. "Please, I can pay you. Whatever you want." "Your money means nothing here," another voice said, cold and flat. "This is about respect." Sofia slowed her pace and peered around the corner of a brick building. In the alley ahead, 3 men in dark leather jackets surrounded a 4th man in an expensive charcoal coat. The surrounded man was tall, with dark hair silvered at the temples, and even in the dim light from the single overhead bulb, Sofia could see the scars running from his left eye to his cheekbone like a map of old violence. His face was ice. His body was perfectly still. One of the attackers, a man with a shaved head and a neck tattoo, raised a knife. The blade caught the light. Sofia did not recognize Salvatore Corsetti. She did not know his name. She did not know that his empire stretched across Philadelphia like an infection, that he had killed 17 men with his own hands, that he controlled every street and every secret and every fear that moved through the city's underworld. She only saw someone about to die. Her body moved without permission from her brain. She found a broken bottle near the base of a dumpster, the neck jagged, the glass sharp enough to cut. She stepped into the alley and screamed, a sound that shattered the winter silence like thrown glass. "Get away from him!" The words came out raw, animal, nothing like her voice. The 3 attackers turned. For one moment, just one moment, they hesitated. They looked at this small woman with hollow cheeks and worn shoes and the broken bottle in her trembling hand, and they calculated whether she was worth the complication. In that moment of hesitation, the man they were attacking moved. But Sofia was already moving too. She stepped between them and him, the broken bottle raised, and the knife came forward not at him anymore but at her. She saw it coming like a nightmare with no waking point. The blade entered her body just below her ribs on the left side, on an angle that suggested the attacker had never actually stabbed anyone before and didn't know exactly where to aim. The shock came first. Not pain, the cold. The knife was so cold it felt like ice being driven directly into her center. Then came the withdrawal, and the cold turned hot, and the hot turned red. Sofia fell to her knees on the wet asphalt, her hand instinctively flying to her side. Her fingers came away warm and dark. The broken bottle fell from her other hand and shattered into smaller pieces. The attackers ran. Their footsteps echoed against the brick buildings and then faded into the warehouse district's pre-dawn silence. The man she had saved kneeled beside her immediately. His hands moved to the wound, pressing down gently but firmly. His eyes, storm gray and burning with something Sofia couldn't identify, searched her face with an intensity that made her forget to be afraid. "Why would you do that?" His voice was deep and solid like an oath, and it trembled. "You don't even know me." Sofia's breath came in short, sharp gasps. The pain was spreading now, expanding, threatening to consume everything. She could feel blood soaking through her second-hand coat, pooling against her ribs. How much blood could a person lose? How long did it take? Because no one else was going to, she whispered. Salvatore Corsetti stared at this small, bleeding woman, and something broke open in his chest. He had not felt this in 8 years, not since his infant daughter stopped breathing in her crib one December morning when she was only 4 months old. He had buried that feeling under violence and power and the careful construction of a life that felt nothing. But her eyes were drowning, and she had looked directly into the blade for him. He pulled his phone from his coat pocket with shaking fingers. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear this and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. The rest of what happened that night, and everything that changed because of it, is waiting for you. Now, let us go back to the beginning. 3 weeks before that frozen night, when Sofia Bennett still had a home, when the fire hadn't yet taken everything, when she was still invisible. 3 weeks before that frozen December night, the fire alarm at the Meridian apartment screamed itself hoarse at 2:11 in the morning. Sofia Bennett woke to the smell of burning plastic and the sound of her son screaming. She grabbed Noah from his small bed, wrapped him in the blanket they share because they could only afford one good blanket, and ran. The hallway was already filling with smoke, thick and choking, rolling along the ceiling like a living thing. She did not think about her possessions. She did not think about her references. She only thought about getting Noah to the stairs, getting him down, getting him out. They made it. 3 minutes later, they stood on the frozen street in their pajamas while the building behind them became a skeleton of black beams and orange flame. Firefighters in heavy gear moved through the smoke like ghosts. Hoses sprayed water that froze almost instantly in the December cold. Noah clung to her, his small body shaking, his breath coming in panicked gasps. Sofia held him and tried to count the ways her life had just ended. A Red Cross worker wrapped them in emergency blankets and gave them each a cup of hot chocolate that tasted like sugar and ash. By dawn, investigators were moving through the wreckage. A fire marshal approached Sofia as she stood watching everything she owned turn to rubble. He was kind, which somehow made it worse. He explained that faulty wiring in the walls had caused the fire, that it spread too fast for anyone to stop it, that she was not responsible. "What about my security deposit?" Sofia asked. Her voice sounded very small in the cold morning air. "I need that to find another place." "What about my work references?" Everything was in that apartment. The building manager arrived an hour later. He was already looking away before he answered. "Building's gone. Everyone's stuff is gone. That's how fires work. No deposit. No insurance on the building. You want to sue the contractors, get in line behind 50 other people." He walked toward his car. He did not look back. Sofia had saved $847 over 8 months of double shifts. The fire destroyed approximately $4,200 worth of her belongings, though most of it was worth nothing: Noah's winter coat bought at a thrift store, her work uniforms, the suitcase that held everything she owned. But those items were irreplaceable because she could not afford to replace them. The Red Cross took her to a shelter on Vine Street. The building smelled like boiled vegetables and industrial disinfectant. They gave her and Noah a room with 2 cots and a small window facing an alley. The shelter provided breakfast at 6:27 a.m. and dinner at 5:51 p.m. Outside those hours, residents had to leave or stay in their rooms. There were rules about noise. There were rules about guests. There was a sign-in sheet and curfew times. It was safe, the woman at the desk said. Many families stayed here. It was temporary. Sofia nodded and did not say that temporary could last for years if you were not lucky. She knew people who had been at the shelter for 3 years. She knew what temporary meant when you had nowhere else to go. That first night, she lay in the darkness listening to Noah breathe. She could hear other families through the thin walls, a baby crying, a man arguing with someone on a phone, footsteps moving through the hallway. She pulled out her backpack and removed a small notebook she had been keeping for 4 months. She had started it when the medical bills began arriving, when Noah got sick with appendicitis and she had to take him to the emergency room. She opened to a new page and wrote in small, careful letters. Medical bills, $47,000. Credit card debt, $12,000. Predatory lender, Marcus $6,000. Total, $65,000. She stared at the numbers. She was 29 years old. She earned $11 an hour. Even if she worked every single hour of every single day, even if she never slept, it would take her 640 hours of work just to break even. It would take her months. It would take her years. She turned to the next page and left it blank. She would add to this list every day. Every time a bill arrived, every time an overdraft fee was charged, every time something broke and she had to pay to fix it. The list would grow. It always grew. The Harrington Hotel's kitchen was warm, at least. Sofia started her shift at 5:38 a.m., arriving with wet hair and the smell of the shelter's industrial shampoo still clinging to her clothes. The night manager, Derek Collins, was already there waiting for her. He was in his mid-40s, with thin hair plastered to his skull with sweat and a coffee-stained tie that had probably been white before he started wearing it. His smile was the kind that made you instinctively step backward. "Bennett," he said, reading off the schedule. "You're on prep and plating. The servers are short today. Tips are probably going to be good." He smiled wider. "I'll help you out." This meant Derek would collect the tips that customers left on the counter, the tips that were meant for the servers, and put them in his pocket. This had been happening for 3 weeks, ever since the fire, ever since Sofia needed her job so desperately that she could not afford to complain. Derek knew this. Derek counted on this. Sofia opened her mouth. She closed it. She thought about Noah in the shelter room, about the $65,000, about the way Derek could call the owner right now and tell him that Sofia had committed time card fraud, that she had stolen money, that she was lying on her employment paperwork about her immigration status. Derek had made these threats last week in the cold walk-in freezer where no one could hear him. "Thank you," she said, very quietly. "I know," he replied. The breakfast rush lasted for hours. Tourists ordered eggs. Business people ordered coffee and pastries. Sofia moved between the prep station and the plating counter, trying to be invisible, trying to be perfect, trying to make her hands move fast enough that Derek would have no reason to find fault with her work. Her feet ached. The kitchen was hot despite the cold December morning outside. Her uniform, borrowed from the shelters Lost and Found, was too large and kept sliding off her shoulder. At noon, Margaret Harrington arrived to review the breakfast service. Margaret was the hotel manager, 62 years old, with silver hair cut into a perfect bob and a diamond ring on every finger. Her suit cost more than a month of Sofia's old rent, the suit alone, just the blazer. She walked through the kitchen with a small notebook, writing things down, her mouth pressed into a thin line. "Sofia," she said without looking up. "These plates from table 4 came back. Were they still wet when they left the kitchen?" "No," Sofia said. "They were dried completely." "Then why did the server tell me the customer complained about wet plates?" Margaret looked up. Her eyes were flat and cold. "Are you calling the server a liar, or are you admitting you sent out wet plates?" Sofia's face burned. She said nothing. "You know what your problem is," Margaret continued, her voice like a blade cutting through the kitchen noise. "You don't take pride in your work. You're barely competent at this job, and you act like you're doing everyone a favor by showing up. We could replace you in an afternoon. There are 100 people desperate enough to work for minimum wage without making excuses." The kitchen had gone very quiet. The other cooks kept their eyes on their stations. No one looked at Sofia. This was Margaret's way, finding someone and making an example of them, turning their desperation into her personal entertainment. Sofia said, "I will be more careful." "See that you are," Margaret said, and walked back out toward the dining room. Derek appeared beside Sofia 15 minutes later. He was holding a small envelope. "Your tips from breakfast," he said, handing it to her. His fingers brushed hers deliberately. "You did good work today." Sofia opened the envelope when he was gone. There were $4 bills and 37 cents in coins. The servers had probably earned at least $50. Derek had kept the rest. She put the envelope in her pocket and did not let herself cry, because crying at work made you visible, and being visible at the Harrington Hotel meant Margaret Harrington would find you and explain, in great detail, all the ways you were failing. That evening, Sofia and Noah sat in the shelter's cafeteria eating dinner, a thin chicken soup and a roll. Noah was 7 years old. He had once had a winter coat that was blue, and he had been excited about it because the pocket zipped. He did not have the coat anymore. He wore a donated jacket from the Red Cross that was too big and had a stain on the collar that would not come out. "Mommy, why can't I go back to the apartment?" he asked. He had asked this before. He would ask it again. "The building got hurt," Sofia said carefully. This was what she had told him, the only truth she could manage. "We have to stay somewhere else for a while." "But my toys are there." "I know, baby. My dinosaurs are there. My T-Rex." "I know." Noah looked at his soup. He did not eat it. Sofia watched him not eat it and said nothing because sometimes mothers had to let their children mourn in silence. Back in the car, because after the evening meal, the shelter required residents to leave, and Sofia had nowhere else to go except her 2003 Honda Civic parked in a lot 3 blocks away, she counted the day's tips again. She did it 3 times to make sure, moving the bills and coins around on the worn leather of the steering wheel while Noah sat in the back seat wearing a borrowed blanket. $2.47. She added it to the envelope from that morning. She counted everything in her wallet. $32.14. That was all the money she had left in the world. That was what stood between her and absolute nothing. The cold seeped through the windows of the car like it was alive, pressing against the glass, looking for a way inside. She started the engine and drove to the gas station to wash her face before her night shift. The fluorescent lights hummed above her head. A woman with perfect makeup walked past carrying a coffee. Sofia looked at her hands under the sink, calloused, red, with a cut on the thumb that refused to heal because she kept working through it. This is temporary, she told herself, the same lie she had been telling herself for 3 weeks. This is temporary, and it will get better, and something will change. But nothing was changing. Everything was only getting harder. Everything was only getting colder. The list in her backpack grew longer every single day, and Sofia Bennett was running out of pages to write on. The cold winter air pressed against the windows of the guest room like something alive and hungry. Sofia sat on the edge of the bed, a real bed with clean sheets that smelled like lavender detergent, not like her car, not like survival, and watched Noah sleep. His breathing was steady now. His stomach was full. For the first time in 3 weeks, he was not wearing borrowed blankets that smelled like other people's tragedies. She pressed her palm against her bandaged ribs and felt the throb of stitches beneath layers of gauze. The knife had gone in clean. The doctor said another inch to the left and it would have punctured her lung. Another inch to the left and Noah would have woken in the car to find his mother cold. The door opened without knocking. Salvatore Corsetti filled the doorway like a storm that had learned to wear an Italian suit. His dark eyes moved from Noah's sleeping face to Sofia's face, and something in his expression shifted, a fracture in stone, a moment of absolute rawness that vanished before she could fully see it. Behind him, Carlo and Gino stood like monuments to disbelief. In 15 years of working for Salvatore Corsetti, they had never seen him look at anyone the way he was looking at Sofia Bennett, a woman they had pulled from a warehouse district alley just 12 hours ago. "His safe," Salvatore said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "Dr. Russo says you'll heal. The stitches come out in 2 weeks." Sofia pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "How did you find me?" "In the alley, I mean." "How did you?" "My men were 3 blocks away." He moved to the window, looked out at the Philadelphia skyline bleeding gold and crimson in the early evening light. "I was supposed to be home. I took a different route. If I hadn't been there, if Carlo and Gino hadn't heard the sirens." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. She understood what he was saying. Probability. Chance. The mathematics of survival that had nothing to do with deserving and everything to do with timing. "Why did you bring me here? You could have called an ambulance, left me at a hospital. Dr. Russo is better than any hospital." Salvatore turned from the window. "And I wanted to know who you were. The woman who stepped in front of a knife for a stranger." The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Rain began to fall outside, a soft percussion against the glass. Sofia could hear it tapping, 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 the sound of the city washing itself clean while she sat wrapped in luxury that didn't belong to her, wearing borrowed safety that felt like it might evaporate any second. "My name is Salvatore Corsetti," he said, as if introducing himself to someone at a formal dinner instead of standing in a bedroom where a sleeping child dreamed whatever homeless children dream when they finally feel warm enough to dream at all. "And I know who you are, Sofia Bennett. I know where you work. I know Derek Collins steals from every server in his section and uses their desperation as leverage. I know Margaret Harrington arrives at the end of each shift to humiliate the staff because their degradation entertains her. I know you've been living in your car for 3 weeks. I know about the fire that took your apartment. I know about the $47,000 in medical debt from Noah's emergency surgery 2 years ago. I know about the $12,000 in credit card debt and the $6,000 loan from a man named Victor Salerno who charges 40% interest. Sofia's hands went cold. How do you? I know everything about this city. He pulled a chair next to the bed and Saturday. That's what my position requires. Information. Power. Control. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. In 8 years, no one has shown me genuine kindness. No one has made a choice that had no benefit to themselves. The men who work for me follow orders because they fear me or because they profit from me. But you had nothing. You stood to gain nothing. And you still stepped forward. Sofia thought of that moment, the sound of shouting, the glint of steel under the streetlight, her body moving before her mind caught up. She had not thought about consequence. She had not calculated the probability of survival. She had simply seen someone about to die and decided that could not happen, not on her watch, not while she still had breath in her body. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. Salvatore stood and walked to Noah's bedside. He looked down at the boy for a long moment, really looked like he was memorizing the curve of his cheek, the way his small hand clutched the corner of the blanket. When he spoke again, his voice cracked like ice under pressure. "When my daughter was born, I held her in my hands and I promised her that I would build something to protect her. Something so powerful that nothing in the world could ever hurt her. I spent 8 years building that empire. And on a Tuesday morning, I walked into her nursery and she was cold. SIDS, the doctors said. Sudden infant death syndrome. Sudden. Like it arrived without warning. Like 8 years of power and money and ruthlessness meant nothing against the randomness of a stopped heartbeat. His hands gripped the wooden rail of the bed. I have not dismantled that nursery. Her name is Maria. I do not say it out loud because the sound of her name is like a blade through my chest. My men do not know this about me. Carlo and Gino have worked for me for 15 years and they have never heard me speak of her. Salvatore turned back to Sofia. Last night, 3 men tried to kill me. Part of me was curious to see if they would succeed. I had made peace with the idea of death. Then you appeared in that alley like you had been sent from somewhere I stopped believing in. You risked everything for nothing. For a stranger. Sofia felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She did not remember starting to cry. That's not why I did it. I didn't know who you were. I don't care who you are. Someone had to. Someone always has to. Exactly. Salvatore moved to the door, where Carlo and Gino still stood like sentries. That is why I'm going to pay your debts, Sofia. All of them. The medical bills, the credit cards, the loan from Salerno. All $65,000. She tried to stand, winced as her ribs screamed. I can't accept that. I don't even know you. You know me better than anyone alive. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket, black, embossed in silver with a single phone number. I own legitimate businesses throughout the city. Restaurants, hotels, real estate development. I want you to work for me. Not as a waitress. As a manager. Something that uses your intelligence instead of just your labor. And what do you want in return? Sofia's voice was steady now, pragmatic. She had learned the mathematics of desperation. Everything had a price. Everything had a catch hidden somewhere, waiting to snap. Salvatore studied her face like he was trying to read something written in a language he was still learning. I want to be someone who gives instead of takes. Just once. I want to know what that feels like. He paused at the door. You gave me that chance when you saved my life. Let me return it. The rain outside intensified, drumming harder against the glass. In the darkness of the hallway beyond the doorway, Carlo and Gino exchanged a look that neither could explain. In 15 years of service, they had never witnessed their boss show vulnerability. They had never seen him sit beside anyone in a moment of genuine need. They had never heard him speak of his daughter's name. "Think about it," Salvatore said. He left the card on the nightstand beside the bed. "Take 3 days. Decide if you can trust me." After he was gone, Sofia picked up the card and turned it over in her hands. Just a phone number. No name. No title. She pulled her handwritten list of debts from her backpack, the pages worn from constant revision, each number added and re-added as interest accumulated and bills multiplied. She had been keeping track of her own destruction with the precision of an accountant documenting a slow-motion catastrophe. The total was $65,000. The number on the card could make it disappear. She looked at Noah sleeping in the expensive bed, and for the first time in 3 weeks, she let herself imagine a future that did not involve sleeping in a car or counting pennies or choosing between coffee and gas. She let herself imagine a life where Noah had a room of his own and clothes that fit and a mother who was not perpetually terrified. But something in her understood, even in that moment of desperate hope, that kindness like this always came with a cost. Salvatore Corsetti had not built an empire by making decisions that benefited other people. He had built it by making decisions that benefited himself, and he had paid for those decisions with the death of his daughter and the permanent closure of something in his heart. Now he was offering to open that heart again. But Sofia Bennett knew, in the deepest part of her that had learned to survive on nothing, that Salvatore Corsetti did not save people. He consumed them. And the only question now was whether being consumed by someone as powerful as him was better or worse than the slow erosion of being consumed by poverty. She placed the card on the nightstand and lay back against the pillows. The rain continued its percussion against the glass. Outside, the city hummed with the sounds of commerce and crime and people making choices that would echo through their lives for years to come. And 3 blocks away, Derek Collins counted the tips he had stolen that night. And 4 miles away, Margaret Harrington looked at herself in a mirror and saw exactly what she wanted to see, a woman of importance, a woman who mattered, a woman whose cruelty was simply the natural order of things reasserting itself. Neither of them knew that the choices they had made regarding Sofia Bennett had just activated something far more dangerous than law or consequence. They had drawn the attention of a man who had learned long ago that true power was not about how many people you could kill. It was about how many lives you could systematically dismantle in ways that left no fingerprints, no evidence, no escape. The rain came down like a blade wrapped in ice, cutting through the December air of Philadelphia's warehouse district. Sofia Bennett sat on the concrete steps outside her new apartment, water soaking through her coat, her phone trembling in her hands. The text from Derek Collins glowed on the screen like a threat carved in light. "Police want to talk to you tomorrow. Bring the $5,000 or bring a lawyer you can't afford." Her breath came in shallow gasps. Inside the apartment, Noah slept in a real bed for the first time in 4 months. Real walls. Real heat. Real safety. And now Derek was going to take it away. The police report he had filed was a lie wrapped in paper. Theft. $1,200 missing from the register over 3 months. All on her shifts. But Derek had stolen that money. Derek, who counted tips meant for servers, who pocketed cash from the register when Margaret Harrington looked away, who had controlled the narrative because he controlled the records. Sofia's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the phone. She thought about running. Not for the first time since Salvatore had found her bleeding on that warehouse floor. She could take Noah, disappear into another city, another shelter, another life spent invisible. The thought was almost peaceful. Almost. Then she looked up through the rain at the apartment window. Noah's drawing was taped to the glass, a crayon picture of 2 figures holding hands beneath the sun so yellow it hurt to look at. His voice echoed in her memory from that morning. "Mommy, when I grow up, I'm going to be tall like Mr. Salvatore so nobody can be mean to you anymore." Sofia stood up. Her legs were numb from cold and fear, but she stood. She was not running. She typed one message with fingers that felt like ice. Derek is threatening to have me arrested tomorrow. What do I do? The response came in 40 seconds. Salvatore's voice, even in text, was deep and solid like an oath. You do nothing. I handle this. Trust me. She deleted the message thread and went inside to her son. 5:47 in the morning, December 15th. The sky was still black when the FBI broke down Derek Collins's apartment door. 12 agents in tactical gear, boots hitting hardwood in perfect synchronization, guns drawn, voices shouting commands that shattered the silence like glass. Derek jerked awake in his bed, his body convulsing with terror before his mind even registered what was happening. He was on the floor before he understood why, a federal agent's knee pressing into his spine, handcuffs biting into his wrists with cold metal teeth. Derek Collins, the lead agent said, her voice carrying the weight of documents and evidence and years of investigation. You're under arrest for wire fraud, theft, extortion, and labor violations under the RICO Act. Derek's mouth moved but no words came. His apartment was being torn apart, drawers opened, files seized, his laptop carried away in an evidence bag. A ledger was held up to his face. His own handwriting, meticulous and damning, stolen tips recorded in columns, totaling $47,000 over 3 years. Text messages confiscated from his phone, threats to employees written in his words. Evidence of immigration status blackmail against 6 workers. He collapsed. Not stood. Collapsed. His legs gave way and he folded to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut, trembling like a wounded animal cornered in its own den. His voice broke into pieces. Please, please, I'll pay it back, I'll give statements, I'll testify, please don't. You should have thought about that before you stole from people who couldn't fight back, the agent said, and there was no mercy in her voice, no negotiation, only the cold machinery of justice that moves forward once it begins moving. They led him out in handcuffs. The hallway was cold. The stairwell was endless. And when he emerged into the dawn air, news cameras were waiting, 12 of them, their lights cutting through the darkness like knives. Every Philadelphia news station had received an anonymous tip about the arrest. Every channel broadcast the same footage, Derek Collins, former night manager at the Harrington Hotel, his face white with terror, his mouth moving in silent pleas, being led into an FBI vehicle while officers placed a hand on his head to protect him from the door frame, a gesture that felt like cruelty. By 7:15 a.m., his name was trending on every local news outlet. 2 hours later, Salvatore Corsetti stood in his office watching the same footage on 3 different monitors. Sofia was beside him, her hand covering her mouth. They watched Derek disappear into the vehicle. They watched him vanish from the world he had controlled for 14 years. Now comes the other one, Salvatore said quietly. Margaret Harrington's estate sat on 12 acres of manicured lawns and marble columns in the suburbs, a monument to her own importance. She was in her kitchen at 9:33 a.m., drinking espresso from a cup that cost more than Sofia's monthly rent used to be when the federal agents arrived. They came in unmarked vehicles that turned into police cruisers once the gate was breached. 12 agents again. Tactical gear again. The weight of consequence made visible. Margaret's face registered confusion first, then outrage. She was still imperious as they entered her kitchen, still certain that her lawyers would fix this, that her money would insulate her, that women like her did not face consequences. Margaret Harrington, you're under arrest for tax evasion, wage theft, and conspiracy to commit labor violations, the lead agent said. Margaret actually laughed. This is absurd. I'm a respected businesswoman. My lawyers will have you fired within the hour. The agent's face remained unmoved. We have 3 years of evidence. Unreported cash income totaling $1.2 million. Systematic wage theft from 47 employees. Falsified tax returns. You're facing federal charges that carry a minimum sentence of 40 years. The espresso cup fell from Margaret's hand and shattered against the marble floor, coffee spreading like blood. She stared at the shards as if they belonged to someone else's kitchen. You don't understand, she whispered. I'm Margaret Harrington. Yes. We know. They walked her out in handcuffs, her designer suit still perfect, her diamond ring still catching the light, her hair still arranged with precision. But her face had transformed into something unrecognizable. Not anger. Not even fear. Something deeper, the look of someone watching her entire identity dissolve like salt in water. The news cameras caught it all. By noon, every channel was running the story. Margaret Harrington, hotel magnate and philanthropist, arrested in FBI raid. Her staff at the Harrington Hotel gathered around a television in the break room and watched the footage. Maria, who had recorded Margaret's cruel conversation at the charity gala and sent it to Carlo, began to cry. Not from sadness. From relief. Sofia watched it all from Salvatore's office. She watched Eric being processed into federal holding, watched his public defender explain the reality of 43 years in a maximum security facility with no possibility of parole. She watched Margaret's lawyers hold a press conference and explain that the evidence was overwhelming, the charges were federal, the empire she had built was crumbling. By evening, the news outlets had run interviews with dozens of former employees. Stories emerged of wages stolen, of tips pocketed, of humiliation weaponized as entertainment. The Harrington Hotel Board of Directors voted unanimously to remove Margaret's name from the building. Her charity boards dissolved her membership. Her family released a statement distancing themselves from her actions. Sofia received a check in the mail 3 days later. $18,400. Her share of restitution from the seized assets. She held it in both hands and stared at the numbers as if they might dissolve into nothing. She also received another envelope. Inside was a letter from the FBI. They had seized the stolen wages. They had frozen Derek's accounts. They had confiscated Margaret's assets. The 47 workers who had been systematically robbed would be made whole. Justice, not through violence, but through the systematic dismantling of everything they had stolen. Death would have been too quick. Too easy. Too merciful. Sofia turned to Salvatore, who was watching her with an expression she could not read. They're really gone. They're gone, he said. And they can never hurt you or anyone else again. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to feel the weight lifting from her chest. But Salvatore's eyes held something else, something patient, something waiting. He stood and walked to the window, his silhouette framed against the city lights of Philadelphia sprawling below them like a kingdom of glass and steel. There's something else, he said quietly. Something I haven't told you. Sofia's breath caught. The FBI investigation started 8 months ago. Before you saved my life. Before you bled on that warehouse floor. He turned to face her. Derek Collins wasn't just stealing from employees. He was laundering money for organizations connected to my family's operations. Your theft report was the evidence they needed to flip him. To make him testify. Sofia's mind reeled. She had thought Salvatore saved her. But the truth was more complicated. The truth was that her courage had been part of something larger, a collision of worlds that had been moving toward each other long before she stepped between 3 armed men and a dying mafia boss. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice trembled. Because you needed to believe that your choice mattered, Salvatore said. And it did. Everything that happened after that night, the raids, the arrests, the federal charges, none of it would have been possible without you. Not because of what I did. Because of what you did. The rain had stopped outside. The city was quiet. And somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, not a threat anymore, but a sound of order being restored, of systems finally working as they were supposed to work. What happens now? Sofia whispered. Salvatore walked toward her. The man who had built an empire on fear and violence and the absolute control of information. The man who had learned to love again by watching her hold his life in her hands. Now, he said, we begin. 2 months after the warehouse floor went silent and the federal agents walked Derek Collins out in handcuffs, Sofia Bennett stood in her new apartment and counted the money in her wallet. $47. She did not need to count it 3 times anymore. She did not need to choose between coffee and gas. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors that creaked in the hallway, windows that faced a quiet street where children played without fear, but it was hers. The lease was signed, the deposit paid, the future no longer something that happened to her but something she was building with her own hands. Noah sat at the kitchen table doing his homework, pencil gripped tight in his small fist, his tongue poking out in concentration the way it always did when he was wrestling with multiplication. He wore clothes that fit properly now, jeans without holes, a sweater without stains, shoes he had not outgrown yet. 3 months ago she was washing his uniform in a gas station bathroom sink. Now he had 3 sweaters. 3. She still marveled at the mathematics of abundance, at the way her life had shifted from counting down to counting forward. The handwritten list of debts still existed, but it lived now in a drawer beneath her socks instead of in her pocket. $65,000. Every cent paid. Derek's confession had triggered an investigation that revealed 15 years of stolen tips, falsified records, wage theft so systematic it had a kind of terrible beauty to it. The class action lawsuit settled for $430,000. Sophia's portion covered her debts, Noah's medical bills, the deposit on this place, and a savings account that now held $8,216. Money she had earned. Not charity. Not rescue packages from a man with an empire of violence. Money. She still worked at Salvatore's restaurant, the one that occupied the entire corner of 19th and Vine. But her job title had changed. Assistant manager, the contract said. $52,000 a year, benefits that included dental and vision and a retirement account she was learning to understand. She managed inventory, trained servers, consulted on menu changes. She worked 40 hours a week instead of the double shifts that used to split her into 2 exhausted ghosts. The rainfall outside was gentle, the kind that whispered against the windows instead of screaming like it had that night in the alley. Sophia stood at the sink washing dinner dishes, watching the rain trace patterns down the glass. Behind her, the apartment was warm. The radiator ticked softly, the kitchen light was yellow and clean, and somewhere in the background Noah was humming a song he had learned at school. This was ordinary. This was the thing she used to think only happened to other people. This was a life. Salvatore had called that afternoon. He called most Tuesdays and Thursdays, always in the late afternoon when she would be closing down the restaurant. His voice through the phone was different from his voice in person, softer somehow, like he was allowing something to reach her across the distance that he would not permit in the same room. They had dinner together twice a week now, always in the quiet booth in the back corner where they could talk without the weight of his men watching, without the constant calculations of power and threat that seemed to follow him everywhere else. Tonight was Thursday. He would arrive at 7. Sophia had made pasta, nothing elaborate, just the kind she used to make when she had one pot and no seasoning other than salt from the table. She had made it now with good olive oil and fresh basil and parmesan that came from a store where the price did not make her wince. The difference between then and now could be measured in small luxuries. In olive oil. In basil. In a drawer full of clean socks. The knock came right at 7. Salvatore always arrived exactly on time, the kind of punctuality that came from a lifetime of commanding people who had learned not to make him wait. She opened the door and there he was, 6'2" and broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire monthly rent, his dark hair silver at the temples, his storm-grey eyes finding hers and doing that thing they always did, like he was looking for something and finding it every time. Noah is upstairs finishing his math homework, Sophia said. He was asking about you all week. Salvatore's expression shifted. It was a small shift, barely visible, but Sofia had learned to read the micro-movements of his face the way other people read books. His jaw loosened slightly. His shoulders dropped. What did he say? He wanted to know if you'd help him with his history project. Something about famous buildings in Philadelphia. I told him I didn't know if you'd have time, but I have time. Salvatore stepped inside, and the apartment seemed to shrink around him somehow, not because of his size but because of the presence he carried, the gravity of him, the density of attention. Sofia, I always have time for Noah. She closed the door and turned back to face him. The rain continued outside, steady and quiet. The apartment smelled like garlic and fresh pasta. Noah's pencil was still scratching against paper upstairs. Come eat first, Sofia said. You look like you haven't stopped moving all day. They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. Sofia had used cloth napkins, the one she had bought at a discount store, and still felt slightly guilty about because they seemed like a luxury even now. Salvatore ate with the methodical appreciation of someone who had learned hunger once and never completely forgotten it. Between bites he asked about her job, about the restaurant, about the new supplier she had recommended for the fish. You have a good eye for quality, he said. Most people don't notice the difference between excellent and adequate. You notice? Sofia shook her head. I notice because I've been on the other side of it. When you eat garbage for long enough, you remember what real food tastes like. Salvatore's fork stilled for a moment. His eyes held something wounded and raw. Then he set it down and reached across the table. His hand was large, scarred across the knuckles, ringed with silver. He took her hand and said, You don't have to eat garbage anymore. Do you understand that? You don't ever have to be afraid again. Sofia felt her throat tighten. I'm not afraid. That's the strange part. I'm not afraid anymore. That's not strange, Salvatore said. That's what it means to be safe. The moment held between them, fragile and important. Then Noah's voice came from upstairs, calling out, Salvatore? Did you come? Salvatore released her hand and stood. I'm here, Noah. Come down. Noah appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair still sticking up on one side from where he had been leaning on his fist while he thought. He was 7 years old and tall for his age, with Sofia's dark eyes and a smile that seemed to have gotten bigger as he had felt safer. He launched himself at Salvatore without hesitation, and Salvatore caught him, lifting him briefly before setting him back down on his feet. I have a project due, Noah said with the intensity of someone delivering extremely important news. It's about important buildings in Philadelphia. And I want to build a model of Philadelphia City Hall. Do you know what that building looks like? I do, Salvatore said. And I know someone who can help us build it. There's a model maker 3 blocks from my office. He's done incredible work for me before. Would you like to visit him tomorrow? Noah's face transformed into pure light. Really? Can Mom come too? Salvatore looked at Sofia over the boy's shoulder. His expression held the question and the invitation. Sofia nodded slowly and Salvatore said, We'll all go together. That night, after Noah was asleep and the dishes were washed, Sofia and Salvatore stood on the small balcony that overlooked the Philadelphia street. The rain had stopped. The city lights glowed against the wet asphalt, creating patterns of gold and amber and distant red. From here, the city looked almost peaceful, like the violence that thrummed beneath it was just something whispered about in dark rooms, not real. I wanted to tell you something, Salvatore said. His voice was different now, quieter, more careful. Something I've been thinking about for weeks. Sofia waited. The rain smell hung in the air between them. When Maria died, he continued, I thought that was the end of my capacity to feel anything but rage. 8 years I've been dead inside, Sofia. Moving through the world like a perfectly programmed machine, making decisions about power and territory and punishment, but not feeling any of it. It was all just noise. Sofia said nothing. She knew he needed to speak this into existence. Then you stepped in front of a knife, he said. A woman I had never met, with nothing in her pockets except $2, and you chose to die before you watched a stranger die. And that choice brought me back. It made me remember that I was human once. That I could feel something other than the hunger for control. He turned to face her fully now. The city lights caught the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, a map of violence that had somehow become almost beautiful on his face because she had learned the story behind it, a rival cartel, a boy, the thing that happened when you loved someone and then lost them. I don't know how to be a good person, Salvatore said. I've built my life on fear and favors and the kind of loyalty that comes from people owing you their existence. But I want to try. I want to try because of you. Because when I watch you with Noah, when I watch him trust me, I feel like maybe there's still time to build something that isn't made of blood and shadows. Sofia reached for him. Her hands moved up his chest, feeling the heartbeat beneath the expensive fabric, the solid reality of him. You saved me, she said. When I was invisible, when everyone else had decided I wasn't worth anything, you saw me. You saw Noah. You decided we mattered. You decided I mattered first, Salvatore said. That night in the alley, you could have walked past. You could have kept your $2 and your desperate life and let me die on that cold concrete. But you didn't. You chose me. I choose you now too, Sofia said. And then she kissed him. It was not a dramatic kiss, not the kind written in stories. It was careful and tender, like two people who had both been broken learning how to trust again. It tasted like rain and olive oil and the slow healing that comes from consistency, from showing up again and again, from believing that another person is worth your energy. When they pulled apart, Salvatore rested his forehead against hers. His hands held her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible given the violence those hands had committed. I want to marry you, he said. Not tomorrow. Not until you're ready. But I want you to know that's where this is going. I want to marry you and raise Noah and build something that lasts. I want to spend my remaining years proving to you that one moment of your courage was worth a lifetime of my devotion. Sofia felt tears on her cheeks. She had thought she was done crying, that the woman who slept in cars and washed in gas station bathrooms had used up all her capacity for hope. But standing on a balcony in Philadelphia with the most dangerous man she knew, she understood that hope was not a limited resource. It was something that could be refilled by another person's commitment. By believing that you were worth loving. By finally, after so long, being chosen. That morning, Sofia woke to sunlight and for the first time in her adult life, she did not count. She did not count money, did not count the days until her next shift, did not count her remaining debts or the reasons why this good thing might be taken away. She simply lay in her bed and felt grateful. That was new too. That was the gift Salvatore had given her without meaning to, not money or safety or power, but the capacity to be grateful without fear, to receive good things without waiting for them to shatter. The handwritten list of debts lay in her drawer, $65,000 completely paid, a monument to how far she had come. She would keep it forever, not as a reminder of what she owed, but as proof that the worst moment of her life was also the beginning of everything that came after. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.